He pushed once too fast, and I stiffened against the kitchen counter, the fridge humming at my back, while the stove light glowed over the sink. The pressure hurt burned, made my breath skip. His hips pressed harder, denim rough on the backs of my thighs. "You're tense," he whispered, voice cracking forehead, brushing the shell of my ear. I nodded, hands flat on cold Formica palms, sweating against crumbs I'd missed after dinner. He eased out a fraction breath, shaking, then nudged again, slower this time, letting the width of him stretch what the first attempt had bruised. My knees wobbled. I felt the wooden chair leg we'd shoved aside dig into my calf. His name left my mouth in a sound that wasn't a word. He froze, pulse thudding through the hand that gripped my waist, thumb stroking thin cotton where my t-shirt had ridden up. I forced air past my teeth, whispered, "It's okay." The words tasted strange, permission I'd never rehearsed but couldn't unsay. He pushed deeper, careful, the ache rolling into heat that fluttered low in my belly. I clenched around him, shock fading into molten relief throat, humming a broken sigh that rattled the measuring spoons hanging on the wall. The house was dark, except for that single stove bulb, and the open fridge spilling weak blue over linoleum. Outside, wind shoved rain against windows, steady patter hiding the soft slap of our bodies. He leaned closer, chest broad against my back, soap and pine on his skin a scent I'd memorized, passing fresh laundry between us for years. My palms slid forward, gripping the counter edge, and I pushed back into him, tentative, then firmer. His intake of breath stuttered like a skipped track. I never imagined I'd cross this line. I'm 43, mother of 2 boys who never notice when the pantry restocks itself. He's 25, my neighbor's son, the part-time mechanic who helps my husband change oil on Saturdays and stays for iced tea because he knows I make it strong. 5 summers of barbecue, invites, birthday candles, casual hugs that lingered one heartbeat too long, quiet longings stored in the silence after everyone else went to bed. Tonight, my husband's business flight was delayed by storms. The boys camped in the den with headphones. I'd texted him that the garage light kept flickering. Could he look? He arrived with a toolbox and rain on his jacket. We never reached the breaker panel. What would you do if the only person who made you feel real was the one you were never allowed to miss? That question pressed into my spine with every slow thrust, now the answer clawing hot behind my ribs. He moved again deeper, the burn sweeter this time, and my head tipped back against his shoulder. Rain thundered on the roof, thunder rolled far off. He tried to speak. I felt the vibration in his chest, but words tangled with the groan that slipped free when I tightened once more. His hand left my waist, slid under my t-shirt, fingers splaying over my stomach, soft flesh. I hide behind cardigans. I flinched, shame flooding, but he whispered, "I've thought about touching you here for years." The confessions stole heat straight to my skin. I pressed his hand harder against the softness, blinked tears that never fell. Our rhythm found a quiet pulse. Small rocking motions synced to the fridge compressor cycling. Every few strokes, the tip of him bumped a place that made my legs tremble. I swallowed a gasp, the sound catching in my chest. He caught it anyway, breath hitching in answer, pushing in deeper with a shaky exhale that fogged the back of my neck. A floorboard creaked in the hallway. We froze. Breath held him buried to the hilt, my nails biting counter-laminate. Silence stretched just rain and fridge hum. Footsteps never followed. He sagged with relief, forehead resting on my shoulder blade. I felt his body tremble against mine, the width of him pulsing inside me. I whispered, Finnish voice raw, and pushed back. He groaned, hips snapping chair leg, scraping tile as our bodies chased the end we'd already started. Heat coiled tight, snapped. I shuddered, clamping around him, bite marks denting my lip to keep from crying out. He followed breath carving my name weight, slumping into me as warmth flooded deep. He stayed inside until ache edged toward pain. When he slipped free, emptiness rushed cold between my thighs. I turned skirt falling, his fingers trembling as they smoothed it down. The stove bulb cast shadows across his face, freckles flushed cheeks, eyes wide with wonder and dread. I touched his jaw, felt stubble scratch my thumb, and realized my hand shook as badly as his. Keys rattled outside the front door, deadbolt clacking. My chest seized. He grabbed his jacket slick with rain and darted toward the mudroom, just as the boys' laughter carried down the hall. I yanked the fridge open, cold air, blasting flushed skin, pretending to search for something, while my heartbeat slammed dish rattle loud. The boys padded in, rummaging for soda. I forced a smile, handed them cans with palms still damp, praying the counter didn't smell of sweat. Their footsteps retreated. I closed the fridge, pressed both hands to the cool door spine, still tingling where he'd pressed. Rain kept beating steady. In the mudroom, I heard the side door open then shut, and his truck engine cough to life. My knees wobbled. I leaned forehead to freezer handle, eyes burning. The house looked perfect, felt painfully quiet, and my body thrummed with the echo of what I'd let happen. If you've ever lived a life where everything looked perfect, but felt painfully quiet, this story may echo more than you expect. Like and subscribe if these truths deserve space. The more you stay, the more these stories find the ones who need them. Mornings begin before the sun, with the soft tick of the programmable coffee maker, and the weight of a house waiting to be switched on. I pad through the kitchen, while the dog stretches open curtains one by one, and stack my son's lunch containers beside their backpacks, always in the same left-to-right order, so nobody has to think. By 6:30, the boys are arguing over cereal. The bus squeals at the curb, and the hush I've organized my life around settles again, clock hands sweeping a silence no one else seems to hear. I wipe the table rinse 2 bowls and stare through the window above the sink. Rain from last night still clings to the pain beads racing each other down the glass. Beyond the fence, his truck idles. 1998, Chevy paint-peeling country radio, just loud enough to leak a steel guitar twang. He kills the engine, grabs a toolbox, and crosses the yard with shoulders hunched against drizzle. He's been making this walk for years, first as the neighbor kid mowing lawns for pocket cash, then as the mechanic who chills our coolant when my husband's schedule won't slow. Now, 25 and solid, he moves like someone used to lifting engines, quiet power wrapped in flannel. The screen door creaks. I'm still at the sink when he steps into the mudroom, shaking water from his jacket. Breakers tripping again. He says no greeting, just the job, but his eyes brush my face, linger half a breath too long. I pass him the flashlight. Our fingers meet. Heat arcs up my wrist, tiny sharp. He pretends not to notice, but exhales harder through his nose, like he's been holding air since yesterday. He heads to the garage. I follow with a towel, watching rainwater drip from his hair onto concrete. The breaker panel hangs open wires neat from his last fix. He crouches denim stretching over strong thighs. You keep the dehumidifier running all night, he asks without turning. I admit the basement still smells of damp, so yes. He nods like he expected that flips a switch, and the overhead bulb flickers alive. Cinematic light slices across dust motes between us. He stands close enough that the citrus of my dish soap mixes with motor oil on his hands. My pulse jumps. I step back, tuck hair behind my ear, stare at the tool tray to avoid staring at the vein pulsing in his neck. He notices anyway. Power's steady now, he says, voice low. Call if it pops again. I say thank you, meaning more than breaker help, but words flatten. He starts toward the door, then pauses at the washing machine chugging through its first cycle. A single white t-shirt, his from yesterday's tune-up, spins with my husband's button-downs. He sees it, lips tug into a half-smile mixed with regret. Forgot that he murmurs. I nod, feeling blood rush up to my cheeks. It's not the first of his shirts to end up in my laundry, soft cotton, smelling faintly of pine soap and gasoline folded into my stack as though it belonged. Once he's gone, quiet expands again. I brew fresh coffee. I won't finish carry a steaming mug to the front window seat and grade worksheets while rain picks at the gutters. Noon sunlight tries to crack the clouds, paints gray stripes on the hallway floorboards. That's when I notice one of the boards doesn't squeak anymore. He fixed it last week after I joked how the boys could never sneak snacks past that spot. Now the house is quieter, and a sliver of me misses the squeak because it meant someone might be coming toward me. Afternoons are for errands, grocery aisles, where fluorescent lights hum louder than conversation post office queue, where strangers avoid eye contact. I practice smiling in the freezer door reflections. The smile never reaches my eyes. At 4, the boys return video game chatter. Fridge door slams, another round of mess to clear by dusk. My husband calls from hotel lobbies in cities I've never visited, voice flattened by speakerphone. He asks if the minivan tires feel okay. I say they're fine, your neighbor's boy topped the pressure. My husband thanks me, tells me to get rest, never asks what I dream about. Evenings shrink to the glow of the hallway sconce and the hum of the dryer. Socks spin warm air brushing my face as I sniff folded towels for hints of mildew. That's when I feel him most, between machine cycles, because he's the only other person awake in this cul-de-sac after 10. Sometimes I hear his truck door thump, tools clinking as he locks the metal box, and I resist flipping on the porch light just to see him glance over. Last winter he replaced the porch bulb, without me asking, climbing the ladder in sleet, while I hugged myself in the doorway. Can't have you standing out here in the dark, he said, handing down the dead bulb like proof of care. Snowflakes caught in his eyelashes. I wanted to brush them away, but offered a paper towel instead. He used it, then tucked it in his pocket, like maybe he'd keep the towel because my hand had touched it. We rarely talk about anything that matters, yet every conversation slices toward the space we're not allowed. When the garage smells of gasoline, he cracks the side door so I can breathe. I say the fumes don't bother me. He shakes his head, mutters something about fresh air being good for people who give too much of theirs away. I pretend not to notice the way his gaze lingers on my mouth when I sip water. The boys think of him as the reliable big brother who tunes skateboards and never misses their birthdays. My husband trusts him enough to leave a house key under the grill, says, "That kid's rock solid." I nod, stomach twisting at the irony. And me, I still fold my husband's laundry every week. Iron the collars. He refuses to button, while daydreams slip like static images of a younger man's hand brushing a crumb from my chin, bending low to test breaker switches, eyes flicking up beneath that worn baseball cap. Sometimes I picture him walking past the couch late at night thinking I'm asleep. I'd reach, catch his wrist, feel the pulse race under my thumb. But daylight keeps my wants tidy, stacked behind chores and school forms. I vacuum the hall where the board used to squeak, listening to the quiet thump of the cleaner head gliding over wood that no longer complains. The hush feels heavier each pass. By the time the boys climb the stairs for bed, I'm still listening for an engine roar that won't come tonight because the rain has turned roads slick. Yet I know tomorrow morning at 6:30, his truck will idle beyond the fence again, tailpipe smoking in dawn chill, the radio humming a song I won't hear. He'll knock, toolbox in hand, asking if the freezer gasket still leaks. I'll lead him into the kitchen, washed in pale stove light, and the hum of the fridge will swallow all the words we still won't say. I woke at 2 a.m. to the dryer's final buzzer, a dull drone that slipped into my dream and dragged me upright. The house was dark, except for the hallway nightlight, its weak glow puddling on the floorboards he'd fixed. I padded to the laundry room, opened the metal door, and warmth breathed out soft cotton citrus detergent, his t-shirt tumbling on top. I lifted it to my face, meaning to fold, but my knees bent before I could stop myself, and I squatted there on the cool tile, inhaling pine and gasoline, like I could pull him inside my lungs and fill the hollow places. Footsteps sounded from the den my eldest had paused his game for water. I stuffed the shirt beneath a pile of towels, heart hammering, and flicked off the light. His silhouette passed the doorway, never glancing in. When silence settled again, I carried the laundry to the bedroom and hid his t-shirt at the back of my drawer under sweaters I rarely wear. The cotton cooled against my palm like a secret oath. Morning arrived, grey and wet fog veiling the cul-de-sac. I poured coffee thumb, brushing the rim of his mug. He'd left it yesterday after fixing a leaky hose. I kept it unwashed, stain rings still visible. My husband's flight wouldn't land until afternoon, so I wasn't surprised to see the Chevy ease onto the curb at 7. He climbed out without calling first toolbox, in one hand, 2 grocery bags in the other. Through the window, I saw a carton of eggs and a loaf of bread he remembered I'd run out. I unlocked the door before he could knock. He stepped across the threshold, boots squeaking. Rain beaded on his lashes. I handed him a dish towel and watched drops scatter across the floor. "You didn't have to bring those," I whispered. "You didn't have to text about the hose," he answered, voice low. The kitchen felt smaller than usual, fridge hum loud. He set the bags down our shoulders, nearly touching. Thunder rumbled. The dog barked from upstairs. He asked if she was afraid of storms. I said she gets jumpy. People do too, he murmured, meeting my eyes. My pulse caught. I moved to the pantry, but he was already there, reaching for the top shelf. His arm brushed my hair, sending static across my scalp. We both froze his breath on my temple, my heartbeat drumming. The boys thundered down the stairs. He stepped back fast, muttering about needing a crescent wrench. I poured cereal, pretending nothing trembled. The youngest asked if Mr. Logan was staying for breakfast. Without thinking, I said yes. We sat around the table, me opposite him, boys on either side, milk cartons between us, like flimsy barricades. He thanked my son for passing the spoon, his gaze flicking to the collar of my shirt, where the edge of a new bruise peaked. I tugged the fabric higher. After the bus left, he offered to check the sump pump. I followed him to the basement, even though I knew it hummed fine. Concrete smelled damp. A single bulb cast harsh light. He knelt, unscrewed the cover for show, then stood so close, the bulb drew twin shadows across our faces. "You okay?" he asked, voice rough. I nodded, arms folded to hide a shiver. Water dripped from a pipe somewhere, counting seconds between us. "I keep thinking it would go away," I said finally, words scraping out. "That I'd forget what you look like when you're tired." He backed up until his shoulders hit the cinder block wall, eyes closing like the admission hurt. "It's worse when I try to forget," he said. Silence soaked deeper. He reached out but stopped, hands flexing. I mirrored the gesture, fingertips hovering at the edge of his jacket, both of us afraid to bridge that inch. A floorboard creaked overhead, probably the dog, but it shattered the spell. He exhaled, stepped around me, and climbed the stairs without a word. I followed minutes later to find the back door ajar, rain blowing in his truck, rumbling away. On the counter sat the grocery receipt, folded into thirds. Inside he'd written, "You still have time to forget." I pressed the paper to my chest until it wrinkled, then tucked it behind the flour canister like a note from high school I couldn't throw away. The rest of the day unraveled in mundane loops. I scrubbed bathroom grout, no one would inspect, bleached the shower curtain until my hands pruned, then stood at the window, watching wind bend the oak in the yard, its bark slick branches straining. At noon, I caught my reflection in the microwave door, hair pulled back, cheeks pale. eyes ringed dark, like I'd stayed up all night, which I had. I touched my lips and wondered if they still tasted like him or like the coffee I kept reheating and never drinking. My husband's flight landed early. He hugged me, one-armed suitcase bumping my knee, suitcase that would leave again in 48 hours. He said the breaker must be good. The fridge light didn't flicker when he grabbed a beer. I smiled, told him Logan fixed it. That kid, he said, admiration softening his eyes. I nodded around a lump that tasted like metal. Dinner was leftover stew. The boys recapped a science experiment. My husband scrolled sports scores. Cutlery clinked. TV murmured. I kept catching my reflection in the dark window woman at the head of the table, present, but hollow. After dishes, my husband kissed my cheek, smelling of airport air. The touch landed dull on skin, still tuned to a younger man's calloused grip. Night dragged. The dog whined for last-minute rain walk. I donned a coat and stepped into damp air, heavy with worms and wet asphalt. Streetlight reflected off puddles. His truck was gone, but tire tracks scored the mud where he'd parked. I traced a tread with numb fingers, shiver crawling up my spine, despite the coat. Inside washer beeped again. I retrieved the final load, unfolded his t-shirt, hidden among towels. Holding it up in hallway light, I saw a faint stain, my makeup maybe at the collar. I pressed the fabric to my cheek, smelled pine and rain. The mirror by the stairs captured the scene. Woman clutching another man's shirt. Husband snoring down the hall. I stared at her, the unsure tilt of her mouth, bruise near her collarbone, eyes glassy with want, and I didn't recognize her at all. 4 nights later, the rain came back heavier, rattling the gutter until water splashed over the porch steps. My husband's conference ran overtime 3 states away. The boys were asleep by 9 headphones glued to their ears. A text lit my phone, garage lights flickering again. Want me to swing by? I stared at the screen, thumb hovering. The breaker hadn't tripped once since his last visit, but I typed doors open. His truck rolled up just past 10 headlights, sweeping the living room curtain. I met him at the mudroom. Him soaked hair, plastered shirt, smelling of wet asphalt. He didn't speak, just held up the flashlight as if asking permission. My nod was smaller than a breath, but it unlocked something. He stepped closer, rainwater dripping onto my bare feet. I shivered, whether from cold or awareness, I couldn't tell. We moved to the garage, a single bulb buzzing overhead, rain drumming the tin roof like impatient knuckles. He set the toolbox on the workbench, flicked the switch twice, proving the light worked fine. Silence swallowed us. He wiped rain from his lashes with the back of his wrist and whispered, "I shouldn't be here." My reply lodged in my throat. I reached for the plug to the portable heater, an excuse to turn away, but he caught my wrist thumb, grazing the bruise that had faded to yellow. My pulse leapt, echoing in the hollow room. I tried to forget, he said, voice rough. It got worse. The heater whirred on warm air, brushing my calves. I shook beneath the cardigan I'd thrown over pajamas. "I don't want quiet anymore," I muttered, eyes fixed on the rain-slick floor. He stepped forward, closing air scent of pine soap, cutting through motor oil. His fingers skimmed my chin, lifting until I met his gaze, blue, storm-bright, pleading. He leaned in. I flinched not from fear, but from the flood of want surging too fast. The first press of his mouth was soft testing. The second stole breath, rain-sweet and hungry. My hands rose palms flat to his chest, meaning to push, but heat seeped through cotton, and the push turned into a pull. He deepened the kiss fingertips, tracing the curve of my neck, and I trembled under the gentleness. Lightning flashed through the small window, illuminating dust swirls. He turned me toward the workbench, back meeting cool wood tools rattling. His hands slipped inside the cardigan, sliding fabric from my shoulders. Last time he'd pushed too fast. This time he waited, searching my face. I nodded barely, but it was enough. He tugged at the hem of my t-shirt, lifting. Cool air kissed skin long hidden. I hissed, half shy, half thrumming. He whispered, "Tell me if you need me to stop." But I didn't. His own shirt hit the floor, damp slap against concrete. Warm chest, faint freckles, subtle rise and fall of breath, so alive it made my knees weaken. I traced a raindrop down his sternum. He shuddered. When his hands found my waistband, I tensed memory of the pain from that first push sparking. He paused, waiting. I exhaled, unbuttoned myself, guiding his fingers. Fabric pooled at my ankles. Heater's fan warming goose-fleshed thighs. He knelt, lips brushing the bruise he'd once gripped apology and promise in one touch. My hands tangled in damp hairnails grazing scalp. He stood denim tight against evidence of need, and I realized how much I wanted to feel him again, without rushing, without fear. He lifted me onto the sturdy stool beside the workbench, sneakers scraping floor. The seat's vinyl cooled my skin. Rain hammered the roof louder, matching heartbeat for heartbeat. He aligned blunt head, sliding against me, and I flinched at the memory of last time's burn. He stilled hand cupping my cheek. Breathe. I did slow inhale, shaky exhale. He pressed again, gradual, letting me open inch by inch, until heat replaced ache. I gasped, hips tilting forward of their own accord. He groaned, forehead pressing to mine, the sound vibrating through my bones. Once buried fully, he paused, both of us shaking. Outside, thunder rolled long and low. He withdrew a fraction, pushed back, finding a rhythm that rocked the stool screws, squeaking but holding. Every drive forward brushed a spot inside that made my toes curl, soft whimpers punching past my lips. He swallowed each sound with kisses, palms framing my face like something breakable. Warmth spread outward, pooling in my belly, building until it frightened me. I clenched around him, nails digging his shoulders, and the pressure snapped white heat, flooding muscles convulsing. I cried out, head tipping back. He caught the sound with his mouth, hips thrusting harder as control slipped. With a guttural exhale, he followed body-locking stool, rattling under combined tremor. We stayed entwined until my legs shook from strain. He eased out slowly. This time emptiness came with a glow instead of cold. My heartbeat thundered in my ears, matching the rain fading to a steady patter. He found a clean shop rag, dabbed sweat from my temple, then helped me off the stool supporting trembly knees. We dressed in hush, his hands gentle when zipping my jacket. Tools lay scattered, silent witnesses. He ran a thumb over my lower lip, then dropped his hand, stepping back like distance might steady what closeness had ignited. A car engine hummed up the street, early commuter or night shift nurse, and panic flickered. He squeezed my hand once, then slipped out the side door into rain. I watched his silhouette jog to the truck, taillights glowing red through mist before vanishing. Inside the kitchen fridge, still hummed light, pooled under the door. I pressed palms to the countertop, where crumbs lingered from yesterday heartbeats still wild. Rainwater dripped from my hair onto the tile, each drop loud in the hush. Upstairs, the boys' alarm buzzed faintly. Another day starting like any other, except I was not who I'd been an hour ago. He tried to force it in the first time. The second time I didn't resist. I folded the boys' uniforms straight from the dryer, smoothing sleeves that already held yesterday's grass stains, and the scent of detergent twisted my stomach because it clung to the spot where his hands had been. Each shirt felt heavier than cotton, as if guilt had weight. I kept dropping clothespins, fingers numb from replaying the garage, my legs around his waist, rain pounding the roof while I whispered, yes. The washer clicked off. The dog barked at nothing, and I braced a wet palm on the machine before my knees gave out. By noon, I'd scrubbed the kitchen grout with a toothbrush, chasing specks no one would see. Steam clouded my glasses, and the window fogged, leaving only the outline of his truck etched in memory on the other side of the fence. I whispered out loud, "It never happened," but the words rang false in the tile echo. My husband's flight landed early, suitcase thumping the threshold, while I was still on my knees with a bucket. He bent to kiss the crown of my head. Lemon scent cleaner masked the heat of my skin. When he asked if I'd slept at all, I lied like a rock, and hoped the washing machine drowned the shake in my voice. He settled into the couch to answer emails, unaware I watched the back of his neck the way a thief eyes a locked door. I wondered if he'd smell motor oil on my skin, if the bruise on my collarbone would darken before night. Instead, he called to me simple things: remote battery coffee refill, and I obeyed like a woman on autopilot, the obedient machinery of our marriage humming again. Late afternoon Logan's Chevy rolled up tires splashing in a fresh puddle. My pulse lurched so hard. The pen slipped from my grocery list, ink streaking the paper. He came for the forgotten socket set, or so he claimed, while avoiding my eyes. The boys burst from the den, high-fiving him because their game console rebooted perfectly after his last tune-up. He ruffled their hair, laughing easily, and in that moment I saw what the world saw: a good man's safe part of the family. I stood at the sink wiping a clean glass, wishing I could scrub the scene from existence. As he turned to leave, the dog jumped muddy paws on his jeans. I lunged with a towel. Our hands collided, and the static snap jolted through my spine. He flinched back, like the burn was real, mumbling thanks, before bolting out into the drizzle. That night's supper simmered, while rain tapped the skylight, soft, steady, almost tender. I set plates, poured water, and felt the bruise when fabric brushed my chest. Each clink of silverware echoed the rhythm of his hips against mine. After dinner, my husband packed for the next trip, kissing me quick, with airline breath promise of souvenir chocolate. I nodded, heart banging so loud I feared he'd feel it between us. When the door shut behind him, the quiet felt like a verdict. Sunday brought church and potluck, the fellowship hall bright with crockpots and gossip. Logan arrived to help unload tables. Megan, the pastor's daughter, handed him a dish towel with a shy grin. He thanked her polite, but his gaze flicked to me over her shoulder, heat and panic tangled in blue. Children darted between chairs while I spooned casserole onto paper plates, palms slick inside plastic gloves. Mark, our neighbor, asked if I felt well. I looked pale. I laughed too high, blaming spring allergies, throat tight as the collar hiding fingerprint shadows. During closing prayer, my youngest tugged my sleeve. Logan needed a first aid kit for a cut. I followed the boy to the storage closet, where Logan sat on a folding chair, knuckles split from a dropped pan. Light from a bare bulb haloed him. The tiny room smelled of bleach and cardboard, same air we shared in the garage. I dabbed peroxide hands, steady, only because they shook too hard to tremble. He whispered, "You're okay," a question and an apology. I nodded, pressing gauze harder than needed, so he'd feel my answer in pain, not words. Footsteps neared. He grabbed my wrist, eyes flaring. "Do you ever feel like no one sees you anymore?" he breathed, voice cracking. I swallowed, unable to speak because right then everyone could have walked in, and I would have let him kiss me. But it was only Emily, from the choir, peeking to return a mop. I sprang away, gauze wrapper crinkling loud as thunder. Logan stared at the floor. Emily's gaze skated from him to me, eyebrows lifting, before she slipped back out without a word. Potluck wrapped chatter spilling into the parking lot, where sun finally broke the clouds. Kids chased each other between bumpers. Adults traded leftovers. My husband, back from his weekend flight, arrived straight from the airport. Tie loose smile, tired. He clapped Logan on the shoulder, thanking him for helping with the heavy tables. Logan managed a grin. then did something he'd never done. He leaned in and pressed a quick, casual kiss to my cheek still flushed from earlier. I froze. Heat raced under my skin vision, narrowing to the spot where his lips touched. The group saw only neighborly gratitude. My husband laughed, said, "We ought to rent this guy." But my lungs locked heartbeat, flooding ears, breath strangled halfway to my chest. He kissed my cheek in front of everyone, and I couldn't breathe. That night the boys drifted to bed early, worn out from potluck tag, and my husband showered off airport grit, while I stacked disposable pans in recycling hands, trembling so badly I kept dropping plastic lids. Logan's goodbye kiss still burned on my cheek like a sun scald, but worse was the heat in my stomach, the spark of wanting him to do it again, with the whole world watching. I rinsed the last spoon and closed the dishwasher. Its hum filled the kitchen, a steady roar that sounded too much like blood in my ears. I nearly jumped when Emily's number lit my phone. Her message was a single line, "Need to talk privately." My pulse crashed. I typed, "Everything okay," she replied. "Tomorrow." Coffee. I imagined the look on her face in the storage closet, how her eyes cut from Logan's split knuckle to my shaking hands, and I knew tomorrow meant reckoning. I swallowed hard, typed 10 a.m. at Gus's, then turned the phone face down. Upstairs, my husband called goodnight. I climbed the stairs, knees stiff, and found him already under covers, scrolling headlines. The bedside lamp painted his jaw in warm light, gentle, familiar, unknowing. He tugged my wrist, pulling me into a one-armed hug that smelled of mint wash and travel fatigue. "Whole church says you killed it on casseroles," he murmured, lips at my hairline. Guilt flared hot. I muttered thanks, switched off the lamp, and lay beside him staring at ceiling shadows until his breathing fell into deep rhythm. Rain started again near midnight. I slipped from bed, padded to the hallway window, and looked down the street. Logan's truck sat dark under the oak wipers, angled like halted arms. I couldn't see him, but a sliver of light glowed inside maybe phone screen blue. My palms pressed the cool glass until condensation blurred the view. For the first time, the quiet of the house felt like someone else's silence, not the one I'd curated. Somewhere in the dark, Emily's unread thoughts pulsed on her pillow, waiting. Morning tasted metallic. My husband left before sunrise, hugging me from behind while I fried eggs. "Back Wednesday," he said, and kissed the bruise he hadn't noticed. After the boys caught the bus, I stood in the doorway, watching exhaust plume into grey drizzle, heart-knocking like shoes in a dryer. Logan's driveway was empty. He'd gone before dawn. At Gus's cafe, Emily waited by the window, hands wrapped around a mug she hadn't sipped. I sat. She cut straight in. "I saw how he looked at you." Steam curled between us. "Emily." I started, but words tangled. Her lips pressed thin. "He's a good kid. Megan likes him. The pastor's daughter cared about reputation, hers, the church's, but also mine." "Nothing happened," I lied. She folded her arms, eyes on the faint bruise peeking above my cardigan. "That's not nothing." Heat crawled up my neck. She sighed softer. "Just don't ruin him, Clara. He'd marry you in a heartbeat and regret it forever." Tears stung. I swallowed them with bitter coffee. She squeezed my hand, once unexpected gentleness, then left without finishing her drink. I drove home on autopilot, parking 2 houses away, when I saw Logan's truck in my drive. My pulse leaped, equal parts dread and relief. I found him in the garage toolbox, open, though nothing was broken, turning a socket in nervous fingers. "Emily cornered me," he said before I spoke. Rain tapped on the roof softer than yesterday. She won't tell, but she knows. His eyes were bloodshot, like he hadn't slept. "Maybe that's the sign," he whispered. "We stop." I nodded, the only answer that wouldn't unravel me. He exhaled, shoulders sagging like an engine hoist, losing a load. I stepped forward, but he backed away, palms raised, not rejection, just raw self-preservation. Don't, he begged, voice cracking. If you touch me, I won't have the strength. The truth of it gutted me. I wrapped my arms around myself, biting the inside of my cheek until copper filled my mouth. We packed his tools in silence, every thunk of steel into the case, an echo of the stool rattling under us days ago. At the side door he paused, rain silvering his hair. "You're more alive than you know," he said, a half-smile breaking. "Just don't forget that, because I'm gone." I reached for his wrist, then let my hand fall. The door shut behind him with a hush, not a slam. His truck reversed down the wet street taillights, blurring red before disappearing behind the bend. Inside the house breathed its normal breath, fridge hum, clock tick, distant dryer turning. I wandered room to room like an intruder. Boys' homework on the table, my husband's travel mug in the sink, Logan's empty coffee cup on the shelf where I'd washed and stored it as if it belonged. I plucked it down, cradled the cold ceramic, pressed it to my cheek. Pine and soap lingered faintly. I set it in the back of the cabinet, behind souvenir mugs no one uses. Evening settled heavy. The boys argued about remote batteries while I plated reheated stew. I laughed at their jokes, but my face felt made of someone else's skin. Logan's porch light remained off. Emily's living room lamp flickered through blinds she paced rehearsal for a confession she might still spill. My phone stayed silent. After dishes, I lingered in the kitchen alone, dishwasher, rumbling windows, fogged from steam. I flipped off the overhead bulb, leaving only the small LED glow on the appliance panel. Shadows pooled under cabinets. The fridge kicked on steady vibration under my bare feet. I slid to the floor against the cupboard knees, to chest listening to machine hum, cover the sound of my heartbeat. In that low blue light, I traced the faint bite mark inside my lip with my tongue, and felt heat bloom even in shame. I didn't mean for it to happen. I didn't mean for him to matter. But for one night, I remembered how it feels to be touched like I'm still here,